How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Peites, Daf 89 of Masechtas Zevachim. Friends, Daf Peites is actually really cool. It's really cool because, we're going to learn two Mishnahs. The first Mishnah discusses the concept of Tadir Tadir Kodem, which is a pretty well-known concept that when you have something that is common and something that is uncommon, or maybe even arguably better yet, something that is consistent and something that is less consistent, or even better yet than that, something that is more frequent and something that is less frequent, the more frequent option takes priority. There are nafkaminas, for example, it's Hanukkah coming up. So there's always, not always, but sometimes it comes out, right? The longest benching of the year. Shabbos, Hanukkah, and Rosh Chodesh. Although, right, Hanukkah is Al Anisim, so that's not really part of it. But then there's Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh. So would you say Ritzei first? You say Yalav Yava first. Tadir Tadir Kodem. You say Ritzei first, because Ritzei is every Shabbos. Yalav Yava is only Rosh Chodesh. Right, so we're going to discuss the concept of Tadir Tadir Kodem. Very interesting. And then the next Mishnah is somewhat similar. It's kind of a related sugya, which is Kol HaKadosh Mechavero Makdim Es Chaveru. That whatever is holier gets priority, and then we will then discuss all sorts of different karbonos, and we will rank them based on how holy they are and how prioritized they are. So friends, that is what we have in store for us on today's daf. I think it should be interesting. Let's jump in. Friends, we're going to begin at the top of daf Peites Amud Aleph, all the way at the top, the beginning of the 10th parak of Masechtas Zevachim, parak Kol HaTadir. Says the Mishnah, Kol HaTadir Mechaveru Kodem Es Chaveru. Whatever is more frequent than its friend is prioritized. The more frequent option is prioritized. Hatmidin Kodmin Le Musafin. The Korban Tamid precedes the Korban Musaf. So if you have Rosh Chodesh in the Beis HaMikdash, so the first Korban that is going to be offered is the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar. That's the first Korban that's always offered. So the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar is going to be offered prior to the Musfei Rosh Chodesh, the Musaf Korbanis for Rosh Chodesh. You're first going to offer the Korban Tamid, which is offered every single day of the year, and afterwards you'll offer the Korbanis for Rosh Chodesh, the Musafin of Rosh Chodesh. Musfei Shabbos, Kodem the Musfei Rosh Chodesh. If you have Shabbos Rosh Chodesh, so which Korbanis do you offer first? The Korbanis for Shabbos or the Korbanis of Rosh Chodesh? The answer is Musfei Shabbos, Kodem the Musfei Rosh Chodesh, that the Korban Musafs of Shabbos take priority over the Korban Musafs of Rosh Chodesh. Musfei Rosh Chodesh, Kodem the Musfei Rosh Hashanah, and the Korban Musaf of Rosh Chodesh would take priority over the Korban Musaf of Rosh Hashanah, since Rosh Chodesh is monthly and Rosh Hashanah is yearly. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Milvad Olas Aboker Asher LeOlas Atomid Taisu Es Eile. This is a pasuk from the Korbanos of Pesach, and it says in that pasuk that Milvad Olas Aboker, that aside from the morning Korban Ola, the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar, which is offered every day of the year, and the understanding of the pasuk is that aside from the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar, which had already been offered, Asher Lolas Atamid, which is a frequent daily Ola, Taisu Es Eile, you will do the Korbanos of Pesach. That the Korbanos of Pesach will come after the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar, which will have already been offered at the point that you're offering the Musfei Pesach. Says the Gemara Minolan, how do we know this concept of Kol HaTadir Mechaveru Kodem Es Chaveru? Minolan, what do you mean? How do we know it? The Mishnah told us how we know it. Milvad ola saboka. We just quoted that pasuk that aside from the ola saboka, the korban tamid, which already been offered, you're going to now offer the musafs. But first comes the korban tamid because it is more frequent. So says the Gemara, well, Dilma Tmidin ein de kadmu musafin. All I know from that pasuk is that a korban tamid comes before a korban musaf. However, mishum de tadir, because the korban tamid is tadir, that's literally frequent day in day out. Musafin the musafin minalim. But how do I know that korban musafs, that when it's Shabbos Rosh Chodesh, for example, how do I know that we have two korban musafs, the Shabbos musaf and the Rosh Chodesh musaf? How do we know that the Shabbos musaf takes precedence, is prioritized? From the pasuk by Pesach, by the Musfei Pesach, so we see that the korban tamid, which is offered day in, day out, every single day, as priority over musaf. These are two separate categories of korbanos. Korban tamid shows a korban tamid and a korban musaf. A musaf is an added special korban, and you have the korban tamid, which is day in, day out, kavua. So between those two categories, the pasuk is saying the korban tamid takes priority. But how do I know that within musafin, if we're dealing with a musaf of Shabbos and a musaf of Rosh Chodesh, even within musafin, there is priority based on frequency? How do we know that? I would argue I don't know it from the pasuk by Pesach, because that is just between the categories of tamid and musaf. How do we know even within musaf? That's what the Gemara is asking. So again, minalan, how do we know this? Minalan, what do we mean how do we know this? We can tell time and bilvad ola saboka dilma tmidin hein dekadmu musafin mishum tadir. Maybe from that pasuk, all we know is that korban tamid takes priority over korban musaf. However, musafin lemusafin minalan. How do we know that even within korban musafs there is priority based on frequency? Amar ba'ila says Rabbi Damar ka'ele. That right after that pasuk, it says milvad ola saboka ashel ola satamid taisvas ela, and then the very next pasuk is, as anybody who's ever been to shul on Pesach knows, ka'ele tasula yom shivas yomim. That the very next pasuk starts by saying ka'ele, that and like these taisula yom shivas yomim, you should offer korban musaf. And the drasha is that just like these, just like the previous pasuk, just like there was priority in the previous pasuk, the pasuk that we had said milvad olas achodesh, milvad olas atamid, milvad olas aboker, ashel olas atamid, that pasuk which prioritized the tamid over the musafin because the tamid is more frequent. So ka'ela, just like these, just like the tamid and the musaf, that priority is given to the tamid because it's more frequent. So the drasha is also when it comes to the musafin, also we'll have the same prioritization structure, that there will be priority based on frequency even within musafin. So again, Amar Ba'ila says to Amar Kash, because the pasuk says Ka'ele Taisu Layom Shivas Yomim, that like these, like the Talmud Shel Shachar versus the Musaf, Taisu Layom Shivas Yomim, you will also have the korban musafs for Pesach. Eile ka'elu, that these korban musafs that we're offering are also like the previous pasuk, i.e., that there is priority based on frequency. But one second. Ka'ele is not there to teach a fancy drasha about priority of korban musafin. I literally need that pasuk of Ka'ele Taisul Yom Shivas Yom to teach me that, in that parsha by the korbanos of Pesach, it describes all of the korbanos that are offered for Pesach. Now those korbanos, all I would know is that they're offered on the first day of Pesach. Right? I don't have a chumash with me, but it says it comes on the 15th day of Pesach. It's a fancy festival, and here are all of the korbanos that you're going to be offering. Now, if that's all that's all the Torah said, so I would know. Okay, on the first day of Pesach and the 15th day of Pesach, all of these korbanos are offered. How do I know about the 16th day? I'm sorry, the 15th day of Nisan, right? How do I know about the 16th day of Nisan, the 17th, the 18th, the 19th? How do I know that these korbanos are offered all of the days of Pesach? So the pasuk says, "Ka'ele," like these korbanos from the first day, Taisel Yom Shivas Yomim. Each day for 7 days, you'll have the same korbanos. So why are we saying that Ka'ele is to teach me this fancy drasha about prioritization of musafin based on frequency? I literally need that to teach me that the korbanos of Pesach are not just the first day; it's for each of the 7 days as well. So if I'm by the Gufa, I need to teach me simply that the korbanos are every day of the festival. Imke nichtov eile taisu layom. Well, the Gemara says, well, if it was only teaching that these korbanos are not just the first day but all days, it could say eile taisu layom, right? The pasuk could say milvad olas hatamid. No, milvad olas habogash olas hatamid taisu es eile. Eile taisu layom shivas yom, etc. It doesn't have to say ka eile. It could say eile. From the fact that it says ka eile, it's for the drasha. So we get of eile taisel yom. Because of eile taisel yom, shivas yom. Avamina eile l'shivas yomim. So the Gemara says, no, that's an insufficient answer to just say. Well, it could have just said eile taisel yom. It couldn't say eile taisel yom, because if it said eile taisel yom, I might think that these 7 korbanos previously listed for to be offered on Pesach, if it just said eile taisel yom shivas yom, I might think that these 7 sheep that were described earlier are for the 7 days, i.e., spread out over the 7 days. That these are the 7 sheep that are going to be offered throughout the entire course of Pesach. If it just said eile taisel yom shivas yom, I might think that these 7 sheep, that's all that's all we got for the entire 7 days. But it says ka eile, like these, we will also duplicate for every single day. So layom ksif, yeah, but 1 second, it says layom. So 1 second, if it said eile layom, it means those 7 korbanos are being offered on one particular day, not spread out throughout Pesach. Okay, but still, if it said eile layom shivas yom, so I would know that on the first day there's 7. I wouldn't know, right, and all 7 are being offered on that day. But what about the other days? How many korbanos are being offered the other days? I don't know. So Amakra Taisu, yeah, but the pasuk says Taisu Shukol Asuyos Shavos. Yeah, but the pasuk says Eile Layom Taisu, that all of the actions should be consistent. So meaning, if we're saying Eile Layom means that the 7 korbanos are going to be offered on one day, and then when it says Eile Layom Taisu, all of the actions of all of the days will be consistent, well then we know Eile Layom Taisu Shivas Yom, that each of the 7 days there will be all of the same korbanos. So again, why does it need to say Ka'ele? The pasuk could have simply said Milvad Olas Haboker Ashel Olas Hatomid Taisu Es Eile Taisu Liyom Shivas Yom, etc. I don't need Ka'ele. If it just said Eile Taisu Liyom Shivas Yom, I would know that the same korbanos that are offered on the first day of Pesach are also going to be offered every single day of Pesach. Excuse me, I need a little water. I don't need the pasuk to say ka'ele. Why does it say ka'ele? To make the drasha of eile ka'ele, that even within musafin there is still the same prioritization structure that we will prioritize based on frequency. Abaye says, you know what? You don't even need that second pasuk. We don't need the pasuk of ka'ele for the drasha. Rather, migufa dikra, that from the first pasuk itself, milvad olas haboka ashel olas hatamid, we learn that priority is always based on frequency, even within musafin, because in ken lemakra milvad olas haboker v'tishtok ashel olas hatamid lamali. Why does the pasuk say milvad olas haboker ashel olas hatamid? Kilu, if it was just teaching that the korban tamid comes before the korban musaf, so just say that it's Pesach, there's all of these korbanos, these musafim that we're bringing because of Pesach, and milvad olas haboker taisu es eile. And aside from the olas haboker, the ola of the morning that was already offered, you also offer the musafin. If that was the case, it would just be teaching that the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar comes before Korban Musaf. Why does it say Milvad Olas HaBoker, Asher Olas HaTamid? I know that the Olas HaBoker is the Olas HaTamid. It says Korban Tamid Shel Shachar. Why do I need to say Milvad Olas HaBoker and Asher Olas HaTamid? Asher Olas HaTamid is extra. It doesn't need to be there. Why is it there? To add particular focus on Tamid, to say that the concept of Tamid is a concept that we will always go by. It's to teach us the concept of Tamid, of frequency, that will always go based on frequency, whether it's Korban Tamid versus Korban Musafim, or even whether it's within Musafin, you're always going to be based on frequency, and therefore, for example, Shabbos will have priority over Rosh Chodesh. Right, so Asher Lolas Atomid Lamali. Why does the pasuk say Asher Lolas Atomid even though you don't need it? It already says Milvad Olas HaBoker Lememar De'ach De Tadir Tiktum. It's to teach us the principle of Kodem, to teach us that whichever is more frequent will always have priority. So there you have it, the concept of Tadir V'She'enu Tadir Tadir Kodem. And now we get up to the next section of today's daf, prioritizing holy. That says the Mishnah that whatever is holier than the next thing takes precedence. Damachatos kodem dama ola, that the blood of a korban chatos takes priority over the blood of a korban ola mipnei shu miratze, because a korban chatos is holier because it is miratze, right? It can atone even for chiyuvei kares. Korban chatas comes to fix things, so it has priority. Evrei ola, however, kodmin le'emurei chatas. However, the limbs of a korban ola take priority. So, meaning we're talking about, right? This whole mission is going to be talking about when a kohen looks at his options of what avoda he could be doing, and one option is to do zrika, is to apply the blood of a chatas, or to do zrika sadam for an ola. So we're saying prioritize the blood of a chatas because it's miratze, because it appeases, atones. However, if what he had before him was the limbs of a korban ola or the emurim of a korban chatas, priority in this case goes to the limbs of an ola, since they are entirely consumed, as opposed to the chatas, it is just the emurim, not the entire animal. So again, every ola, if it's between the limbs of a korban ola, kodmin le'emurei chatas, those will take priority over the emurim of a korban chatas, mipnei shu kalub la'ishim, because when in terms of burning the limbs of an ola, the entire animal of the ola all of the limbs of the ola are burnt on the mizbech, as opposed to just the emurim of the chatas. Chatas kodem l'asham. Korban chatas takes priority to a korban asham, mipnei dama nitan ledalid kronos ve'ala yesod, because the blood of a chatas is on all four horns of the mizbech, whereas the asham is shtaim shein arba, and also explicitly the Torah writes that the remainders of the blood, the shiare adam of the korban chatos, will be poured on the yesod of the mizbeach, whereas the asham, if there is anything left over, it will be poured on the yesod, but it doesn't write that explicitly in the pasuk. It's explicitly written in the pasuk by chatos. Asham kodem litoda in ve'el nazir. In asham takes priority over a korban toda and a korban el nazir, which is a korban type of shlomim. Mipnei shehu kodshim, because the asham is kodshim, whereas the toda and el nazir are kodshim kalam. Toda ve'el nazir kodmim li shlomim. The korban toda and the el nazir, the ram of the Nazirite, take priority over a korban shlomim mipnei shein nechon liyom echod, because the toda and the el nazir are eaten for just one day, whereas a korban shlamim is more lenient in that it can be eaten for 2 days. V'tunin lechem, and additionally, the toda and el nazir are offered together with breads, and the shlamim is not. Hashlamim kodmin libechor. The korban shlamim takes priority over a korban bechor, because mipnei shein tunin matan dalid, because shlamim is the blood is shtaim shein arba, whereas a bechor is just matana achas. It's just one zrikas adam. V'smicha v'nesachim v'tenufas chazav hashok. Additionally, a shlamim has smicha. The owner leans on the animal v'nesachim and minchas nesachim yisuchayayin v'tenufas chazav hashok, and waving of the breast and the thigh of the animal. These things are not by a bechor. Ha-bechor kodem l'maiser. A bechor, a korban bechor, takes priority over maiser behema mipnei shekdushaso meirechim, because the holiness of the bechor is already from the womb. It's born. It's born with the kedusha of bechor, and it's born destined to be a korban. Whereas the maiser behema is not born that way. You choose 1 out of every 10, and 1 out of every 10 is selected to be a korban, and from that point on, it's holy. Additionally, the korban bechor is eaten specifically by kohanim, whereas meiser behema is eaten by the owner, whoever. Ha-meiser kodem l'ofis. Meiser behema takes priority over bird offerings. Now, as we're going to learn at the very end of the Mishnah, in another few lines, a chatas ha'of takes priority over an olas ha'of. Okay, so when we're talking about priority of the meiser behema versus ofis, we're specifically talking about the chatas ha'of, because anyways, chatas ha'of takes priority over olas ha'of. So if we can show that meiser behema takes priority over chatas ha'of, then obviously it takes priority over olas ha'of. And meiser behema does take priority over chatas ha'of because mipnei shehu zevach v'yesh bo kodshei kodshim, because number one, meiser behema is a zevach. It is a animal offering as opposed to birds, right? Animal offerings are more, you can find an animal offering in all types of korbanos, which is not the case for bird offerings. Bird offerings, you have an olas ha'of, chatas ha'of. You don't have a shlomim ha'of. You don't have a todas ha'of. You don't have a meiser ha'of, right? So all of the korbanos are, right, they're more, I'm not sure what the word I'm thinking of is, but they're kind of a more well-rounded korban material. So because it's a zevach, because it is an animal as opposed to a bird, that takes priority. And also v'yeshbo kodshei kodshim damu ve'emurim, and also the blood and the emurim of the meiser, right, the meiser behema, will go on the mizbeach, whereas by a chatas ha'of it's just the blood. No part of the bird goes on the mizbeach. It is entirely eaten by the kohanim. So therefore, meiser behema takes priority over chatas ha'of, and as we're going to learn in a minute, chatas ha'of takes priority over olas ha'of. Ha'of is kadmin l'menachis. Bird offerings take priority over flower offerings, mipnei shein minei damim, because they have blood, and therefore there's blood to be thrown on the mizbeach, sprinkled on the mizbeach. Minchas cholte kodem and minchas nedava. A sin flower offering takes priority over a donated flower offering, mipnei shu ba'al chet, because it's coming to atone for a sin. And as we've said, chatas ha'of kodem is the olas ha'of v'chein be'ekdesha, that a chatas ha'of takes priority over an olas ha'of. And also be'ekdesha, if you have a cane, a nest of 2 birds, and one's going to be a chatas, one's going to be an ola, you would designate the chatas bird before the ola bird. Now, we had learned the other day already, a few weeks ago probably, when we had a Masechta Kinim deep dive, that it's preferred for the owners, at least, of the nest not to designate anything in advance and to allow the Kohen to designate them b'shas maaseh, to avoid any confusion, or to try to avoid confusion. But maybe it's even saying that the Kohen as well would prioritize the chatas ha'of over the olas ha'of. I guess if he's designating it, or anyways, when designating a chatas ha'of and an olas ha'of, the priority goes to chatas ha'of. Says the Gemara, how do we know this? What? How do we know that the blood of a chatas has priority over the blood of an ola, and that the limbs of an ola have priority over the limbs of over the emurim of a chatas? The Tanul Rabbanan, the Rebbe is taught, Ufarsheni ben Boker tikach lechatos. This is a pasuk by the Chanukah Levim, that when the Levim were being, I don't think the word is inaugurated, but anyways, when there's like a different, there's a different word, I think. But when the Levim were being introduced to the service in the Mishkan, so as part of it, it says uparsh. So there was one cow was a korban ola, ufarsheni ben bakar tikach lechatas, and a second cow shall be taken as a sin offering. In Babble lamed shein shnai marik kvar ne'amar. Well, if it, why is this pasuk saying and a second cow is taken for a chatas? If it's just teaching that there are two cows, well, we have another pasuk in the same context that says ve'also se'echad chatas ve'se'echad ola, that one cow will be a chatas and the other cow will be an ola. So matam lamu farsheni ben bakar tikach lechatas. Why does it say that a second cow will be for a korban chatas? Sheyachos shetei chatas kodemes l'chomaise ola. Is it possible that the korban chatas would take priority over the korban ola? Talmud lomar ufarsheni ben bakar tikach lechatas. That it's the second cow that's going to be for the sin offering, i.e., that the chatas is second. Well, if that's the case, so does this mean that a korban ola always takes priority over a korban chatas? That the other pasuk says that the first one will be the chatas and the second one will be the ola. How could this be that the ola is before the chatas, but the chatas is for the ola before the ola? What is this? So dam chatas kodem ledam ola. Well, the answer is that when it comes to blood, chatas takes priority because it appeases for sins. Every ola v'chulei. However, when it comes to the limbs, so the limbs of the ola take priority over the emurim of the chatas. Amai. Now the Gemara suggests something interesting. Is why are we saying that all of the when it comes to a korban chatas, so the blood is applied to the four horns of the mizbeach, as we've learned. We've also learned in Perek Beis Shammai that according to Beis Hillel, one application of blood is enough. So the Gemara has an interesting question, which is, well, why would all four applications of blood of the korban chatas precede the blood of a korban ola? Maybe it should just be the first application of blood, because that's the one that you need to be yotze for technically to be yotze for the blood of a chatas, and then right after the first one, jump to the ola once you've technically been yotze the mitzvah for the chatas. Let's just say that the first application of blood to one of the horns of the mizbeach for the chatas, that takes priority over the ola. V'hanach lo. But not the remaining three applications. By then you'll already be working on the blood of the ola. So Amar Ravina says, Ravina acha bechatas alevim askinan. Well, says Ravina, look, these psukim are by the chatas of the levim, the korban chatas that they were bringing as part of their inauguration. That may be, I don't know if that's necessarily the word I was thinking of, but I think it's a very, very qualified word for this context, the inauguration of the Levim, and the korban chatas that was being brought in the context of the inauguration of the Levim. It's not because anybody sinned. So for all intents and purposes, right, the afagav dechi ola dami, even though the chatas of the inauguration of the Levim was essentially like an ola in that it wasn't coming to atone for any sins, and nonetheless, ka'amar achmana hi tikdum, and even so, even though it's just like the ola, the Torah still says prioritize the chatas for some reason. So just prioritize it in its entirety. It's not based on any reasons or being yotze this or yotze that. it said the Torah says prioritize the chatas, and we're saying when it comes to blood, the priority goes to the chatas. Okay. B'marav Amrei Hol v'hischil b'matanos gomer. In Eretz Yisrael, they said, look, once already you're starting to do the matanis, you finish them. You don't say, well, let's just do one. Technically, we're Yotze. Let's now hop to the other one. Maybe we'll get back to the other. Once already, we're going to be prioritizing the chatas. Do it entirely. When you're done with the chatas, move on to the ola. Gonna drink a little water. Okay, now we're gonna have like a whole bunch of for the next little chunk we're gonna have like, oh boy, all sorts of comparisons, right? When it comes to the chatas and the ola, so we had said that the blood of the chatas takes priority over the blood of the ola. The limbs of the ola take priority over the emurim of the chatas. But now we're going to start pitting against each other different things. What about the blood of the chatas versus the limbs of an ola? Right? Those are right. Those are in our two sort of matches between the blood of a chatas and the blood of an ola in one match, so to speak, and the limbs of an ola and the emurim of a chatas in the other match. The two winners of the two matches are the blood of the chatas and the limbs of the ola. Who would win in a match, so to speak, between the blood of a chatas and the limbs of an ola? We know that between the blood of the chatas and the blood of an ola, blood of the chatas wins. Between the limbs of an ola and the emurim of a chatas, limbs of an ola wins. What about between the blood of an ola? What about between the blood of a chatas and the limbs of an ola? What about between the blood of an ola and the emurim of a chatas, etc.? So says the Gemara, Babble they ask a kasha, dam chatas ve'evrei ola ezman kodem. So if it's between the blood of a chatas and the limbs of an ola, which wins? Which has priority? Dam chatas kodem pnei shemratze. Do we say the blood of the chatas takes priority because a chatas is miratze for sins? It appeases. Oh, Dilma, every ola kodem. Wait, maybe the limbs of the korban ola should take priority. Mipnei shein kalu leishim, because the korban ola is entirely burnt on the mizbeach. Which one wins? Tashma, come in here. These we're going to be making like different kind of split hair diyukim. It's going to be a little technical, but we'll do it. It's not like hard. It's just technical. Tashma, come in here. Dam chatas kodem dam ola. So we said that the blood of a chatas takes priority over the blood of an ola. Ledam ola udikadim le'evri ola lo kadim. So let's say, we said the blood of a chatas takes priority over the blood of an ola, not the limbs of an ola. Adrabah, fakert, miseifa. We have a similar thing in the seifa for the ola. Every ola kodmin le'emuri chatas, that the evarim of the ola take priority over the limbs, the evarim of the ola take priority over the emurim of the chatas. Le'emuri chatas udekadim, le'dam chatas lo kadim. So the limbs of an ola take priority over the emurim of the chatas, not the blood of a chatas. We can't know the answer to our inquiry from these diyukim from the Mishnah. Next, Ibailu, dam ola ve'emuri chatas, the consolation match. The blood of the ola and the emurim of the chatas, the two losers. Ezemein kodem, which will take priority? Dam ola kodem de kasim kolil. Do we say the blood of the ola will take priority because it comes from a ola and olas are entirely burnt? Odilma emuri chatas kodem de kasim koch mechaper. Maybe the emurim of the chatas take priority because it comes from a chatas which brings kapara. Tashma, come here. Dam chatas kodem the dam ola. The blood of a chatas takes priority over the blood of an ola. Dam chatas hu dikadim li dam ola aval emuri chatas lo. We say, okay, so the blood of a chatas takes priority over the blood of an ola, but not the emurim of a chatas. Adrabah, fakert miseifa, from the seifa, every ola kodem le emuri chatas, that every ola, the limbs of the ola take priority over the emurim of a chatas. Every ola who dekadmi le'emure chatos aval dam. I'm saying every ola who dekadmi le'emure chatos aval dam ola lo. The limbs of the ola take priority, not the blood. Therefore, we can't learn out anything from that. I kind of lost the flow as I was going through that, but anyways, we can't learn out anything from that, right? This is just, you gotta like latch your brain onto it, and my brain, the latch came out. But anyways, it's just making tiyukim from the Reisha. Like, let's say this, let's say that, but let's say, anyways, from the Reisha, from the Sefer, I'm gonna drink more water. Okay. Where are we? Ibrahim asks a kasha, dam ola v'dam asham. Ezmeim kodem. The blood of an ola and the blood of an asham, which takes priority. Dam ola kodem dikasmi koach kolil. Do we say that the blood of a ola takes priority over the blood of an asham because an ola is a korban that is entirely burnt in the mizbeach? Odum dam asham kodem dimechaper. Or maybe the blood of the asham takes priority because an asham is a type of korban that brings atonement. Tashma coming here, dam chatas kodem dam olas. We said the blood of a chatas takes priority over the blood of an ola. Aval dam asham lo, but the blood of an asham does not take priority over the blood of an ola. To which the Gemara says, not necessarily, but dinu di ibari lemisnei dam asham. Not necessarily. I can argue that the blood of an asham also takes priority over the blood of an ola, and the Mishnah could have said that the blood of an asham takes priority over the blood of an ola. Why did it not? Why instead did the Mishnah say that the blood of a chatas takes priority over the blood of an ola? By the deba lemisnei sefer, because in the sefer it needs to say every ola kodmin le'emurei chatas, that the limbs of an ola take priority over the emurim of a chatas. The tana le'emurei asham, that if, however, there it would have said that the limbs of an ola take priority over the emurim of an asham. Well, I might have a mina. I may have thought. I may have thought le'emurei asham udikadme le'emurei chatas lo kadme. I may have then thought if the Mishnah said that the limbs of an ola take priority over the emurim of an asham, I would say okay, that's fine, but not the emurim of a chatas, because as we know from the Mishnah, a chatas takes priority, is more stringent than a asham. So if the Mishnah had said that the limbs of an ola take priority over the emurim of an asham, I would say fine, but they wouldn't take priority over the limbs of a chatas. So mishumachi tana chatas, that's why we had to say, that's why we're talking about a chatas. So when it says that the limbs of a ola take priority over the emurim of a chatas, and certainly over the emurim of an ola. However, I could argue that in terms of the blood of a chatas taking priority over the blood of an ola, I could say that that would apply also to the blood of an asham, would also take priority over the blood of an ola. Now, Tashma coming here, chatas kodem le asham, that a chatas takes priority over an asham. Chatas hu dikadma le asham, aval ola lo. Okay, so I'll say that when the Mishnah says that a chatas takes priority over an asham, so a chatas takes priority over an asham, fine. An ola doesn't take priority over an asham. So we want to argue from here what that means is that the blood of an ola does not take priority over the blood of an asham, and therefore the blood of the asham will take priority. My lav dam. So let's say that the Mishnah is talking about blood, that the blood of a chatas takes priority over the blood of an asham, and we're saying that the blood of an ola does not take priority over the blood of an asham. Lo emurim. No, it's talking about the emurim, that the emurim of a chatas take priority over the emurim of an ola. But it's not talking about, the emurim of a chatas take priority over the emurim of an asham. But it's not talking about blood to imply that emurim of an asham, that the blood of an asham take priority over the blood of an ola. Tekanami, we can also infer that we're talking about emurim versus blood. Tekatanu mipnei shedama nitan shmamina. That we had said that the chatas takes priority over the asham since its blood is the four corners and this yisod of the mizbeach. So clearly from the fact that as the reason for the chatas taking priority over the asham, we are referencing the fact that the blood takes priority because it's more blood, means that the part of the chatas that we're talking about preceding the asham is not the blood, because if we're talking about the emurim, that the emurim of a chatas take priority over the emurim of an asham, since as the Mishnah says, since its blood is the four corners and the yisod, etc. Which means that the comparison between chatas and asham is not about the blood; it's about something else. It's about the emurim, and the reason for the priority of the chatas is because of the blood. So we're not talking about the blood, we're talking about the emurim and using the blood as a reference. So therefore to say that, we wanted to say that the Mishnah was saying that the blood of a chatas takes priority over the blood of an asham. So the chatas takes priority over the asham, but not the blood of an ola take priority over the blood of an asham. But we're not talking about blood, we're talking about emurim. Okay. That I think we end those little kind of subtle, tricky inference stuffs. And now, chatas kodem is v'chule. We said that the chatas takes priority over the asham. Adraba fakir to asham kodem. Let's say that the asham takes priority. Sheken yeshlo kitzba, because by an asham, not by all ashams, I think not by an asham mitzora and an asham nazir. I think that's accurate, but by an asham meilos, asham gizelos, I think also an asham shifcha charufa, there is a specific amount that you must spend on an asham, and that is bekesef shkolim. I think, is that what it says? Anyways, it has to be two shekels, whereas a korban chatas could be any amount. So therefore, an asham has that stringency, so an asham should have priority. Afilu achi, even so, riboy the mizbeach adif, the fact that there is more going on the mizbeach for the chatas, there's 4 applications of blood as opposed to shiraim shen arba, and all it says, the Torah specifically says that the shiraim is part of the mizbeach, so that gives priority to the chatas. Asham kodem the toda v'chulei. The korban asham takes priority over the korban toda, since the asham is kadshe kadshim. Adraba hatoda vel nazir kadme. I'll argue that the korban toda and the el nazir should take priority. Shekain to unin lechem, because you have to bring breads with them. You don't bring breads with an asham. Afilu achi kadshe kadshim adife. Nonetheless, priority goes to the asham since it's kadshe kadshim, and the toda and el nazir are only kadshim. Kalam toda vel nazir v'chulei. Toda el nazir take priority over a shlamim. Adrab a shlamim kadme. I'll argue that the shlamim should take priority. Shekin yeshnon b'tzibur kibiyachid, because there's also a concept of shalmei tzibur. There's no todas tzibur. There's no el nazir tziburs. So afilu achi, even so, nechon liyom echad adif. Nonetheless, the toda and el nazir take priority since they are only eaten for one day, whereas a shlam is eaten for 2 days. Between the toda and the el nazir, which takes priority? Toda kadma shekin tuna dalid min elechem. Does the toda take priority over the el nazir, since the toda requires 4 different types of breads, whereas the el nazir is only 2 types of breads? Odilma el nazir kodem shekin yesh imo damim acherim. Or maybe the el nazir takes priority since it is brought together with other korbanos as well. When the nazir has completed his nazirus, he brings an el nazir, which is a shlamim, but he also brings a chatas, and he also brings an ola. And therefore, since the el nazir is coming together with a chatas and an ola, maybe that gives priority over the toda, which is coming alone. So tashma zo kodem stazo, the toda takes priority over the el nazir. Shezo tiuna dal mine lechem v'zoyena tuna ela shnei mine lechem, because the toda requires 4 types of bread, whereas the el nazir requires a mere 2 types of bread. Ashlam kodem lebechor v'chulei. The shlamim takes priority over the bechor, since shlamim has shtaim shein arba, as opposed to just 1 zrika, and also there is smicha, there is nisachim, there is tenufas chazav ashok by a shlamim. None of those are by a bechor. Wait, but I'll argue that the bechor should take priority, since it's holy from the time that it's born, and it's only eaten by kohanim. But still, there's more mitzvahs by the shlamim. There's shtaim shein arba, there's more zukas adam, there's smicha, there's nisachim, there's tenufas chazav ashok. So therefore, the shlamim takes priority. Bechor kodem v'chulei. The bechor takes priority over meiser, since bechor is holy from the time that it's born, and it's only eaten by kohanim. Adraba meiser kodem. I'll argue that meiser should take priority over bechor. Shkein mekadesh lefanav v'la'achrav, because by a meiser it makes holy also what is before it and afterwards. What does that mean? It means that the way that Meiser Behema is Meiser Behema, I'm learning now Mishnayis Bechoris. I think the fourth parak of Mishnayis Bechoris. The last parak of the Mishnayis of Bechoris talks about Meiser Behema. So I will be there soon. So I haven't learned this yet. Excuse me. Drinking a little water. This is what's kind of awesome about learning Mishnayos is that, here's this concept of Meiser Behema. I kind of know vaguely what Meiser Behema is. What is it? You have animals, let's say sheep, and then once a year you take 1 out of every 10, a tenth of the flock, and you bring it as korbanos, and you count out 10, whatever. So vaguely I kind of know about it, but I'm looking forward to the 9th parak of Bechoros where I can actually learn the Mishnayos, kind of get like an overview. Got like a good reference point of kind of another place that, once I've learned it, I can always look back at it to figure out the details and stuff. Anyways, it's like something that I haven't really learned before. Anyways, so there's a Mishnah there in the 9th parak of Masechta Bechoros that says that how does Meiser Behema work? So you will pass all of your kind of sheep and you'll have some kind of stick. I think it has like red paint on it or something. And you'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And when you get up to 10, you'll mark the 10th sheep as being Meiser Behema, and you'll know to offer that one. What if you messed up on the count? I can imagine maybe you have a lot of sheep and you were counting and you totally messed up. And you did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 9, 10. He called number 9, 10, and he called number 10, 9, and then after calling number 10, 9, he called number 11, 10, totally messed it up. Well, so basically, again, 9 was called 10, 10 was called 9, 11 was called 10. So 9, 10, and 11 are all going to be kaddish. So because of that, let's say that Meiser Behema is more stringent in that it could be mekadesh before it and afterwards, 9 and 11. Okay. Even so, Bechor takes priority since it is holy from birth. We said that Meiser Behema takes priority over birds because A, it's a zevach, it's an animal offering, and secondly, because there's the blood and the emurim that go on the mizbeach. Adarabba, ofis, kadme. Let's say that the birds take priority. Shekain kadshe kadshim. The birds are kadshe kadshim. Olasa'ov, chatasov. Those are both kadshe kadshim. Meiser is only kadshim kalim. Afiluachi min zevach adif. Still, priority goes to the Meiser Behema since it is an animal sacrifice as opposed to birds. Amar Ravina says Ravina bar Shila. Emurei kadshim kalim sheyatzu lifnei zrikas damim psulin. Says Ravina bar Shila that the emurim of Kachim Kalim, we've discussed recently that a Kachim Kalim does not have Kedushas Haguf. There's no Din Me'ila by Kachim Kalim. The exception is after Zrikas Adam, the Emurim that go on the Mizbeach, those become Kachim, and there is a Din Me'ila there. Now, what if the Emurim of a Kachim Kalim were taken out of the Azara prior to Zrikas Adam, when they were not yet Kadshe Kadshim? And then there was Zrikas Adam. What happens now to these Emurim? So we're saying, Amar Ravina says, Ravina bar Shila, Emuri Kadshim Kalim, if you have the Emurim of Kadshim Kalim, Sheyatzu Lifnei Zrikas Damim, that were taken out of the Azara prior to Zrikas Adam, Psulin, they are now pasul, and they won't be offered on the Mizbeach. V'tanatuna, and our Tanatuna, and our Mishnah, Mepneshu Zevach, that we said about the Meiser Behema, that it takes priority over the Chatas Ha'of, because Meiser Behema is a animal offering. V'yeshno Kadshe Kadshim, and there is Kadshe Kadshim by the Meiser Behema, Damav Ve'emurav, and we're talking about its blood and its emurim. Now, Bishlama emurin less nuba ofers. Now, I understand why the Mishnah would say that Ma'aser Behema takes priority over birds because it has emurim, and Chatas Ha'of doesn't have any emurim. But Eladam, Mia Ise, why are we saying that Ma'aser Behema takes priority over Chatas Ha'of? Because Ma'aser Behema has blood and emurim. Right, Ma'aser Behema has blood and emurim. Chatas Ha'of also has blood. Q, point out that which Chatas Ha'of doesn't have. Say, Ma'aser Behema takes priority over Chatas Ha'of because Ma'aser Behema has emurim, Chatas Ha'of doesn't have emurim. But to say that it has blood and emurim, I mean, Chatas Ha'of also has blood. You do zrikas, you do azaz adam, you press the blood against, right, the bird against the mizbeach. So elalav kamash malan. So what it's teaching is emurim kidamu. It's saying blood and emurim to compare the emurim to the blood. Madamu lifnei zrika emurim kodem zrika. Just like when we're saying that the Ma'aser Behema has priority over the Chatas Ha'of because it's Kodesh Kodashim and it's right, it has the blood and the emurim. When are we saying that the blood is Kodesh Kodashim? Prior to Zrikas Adam. After the Zrikas Adam, it's already done. So we're talking about prior to the Zrikas Adam. We're calling it Kodesh Kodshim. So v'kakari lu Kodshim, and we're calling the blood Kodshim, and we're calling therefore also we're also calling the emurim Kodshim, and we're talking about before the Zrikas Adam. So umadamo mifsal biyotze, and just like the blood would be pasul biyotze, because we're calling it Kodshim. So af emurim mifsale biyotze. So also the emurim, right? We're talking about the blood and the emurim prior to Zrikas Adam. We're calling them Kodshim, and if they would leave the azara, they would become pasul. Let's say that this supports Ravina Bar Shila's notion that the emurim of Kodshim Kalim prior to Zrikas Adam that leave the azara are pasul. B'sar Kodshim Kalim sheyotza lifnei Zrikas Adam, the meat of Kodshim Kalim that would be eaten by the Kohanim, by the owners, that is taken out of the azara prior to Zrikas Adam, prior to them being allowed to be eaten. Rabbi Yochanan Amar kosher. Rabbi Yochanan says nonetheless the meat is kosher. Rish Lakish Amar pasul. Rabbi Yochanan Amar kosher whole v'sofo latzes. Rabbi Yochanan says it's kosher because look, ultimately they'll be taken out of the azara anyways. Kodshim Kalim can be eaten anywhere in Yerushalayim. Rish Lakish Amar pasul adayin lo yigiz manu latzes. Rish Lakish says possible because look, at the end of the day, it is not yet time for them to be taken out, and therefore they are taken out prematurely and they are pasul. Adkan lo plige ela bebasar. Now the machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish is with regard to the meat. The Rabbi Yochanan says it's kosher because it can be taken out, it's going to be taken out of the zara. Hava be'emurim lo, but everyone would agree by the emurim that they would be pasul, like Ravina Bar Shila is saying. Hu adin de be'emurim nami plige. No, you could say that the machlokas is also by the emurim. Rabbi Yochanan would still say there that they are kosher. And the only reason why they're arguing about the meat is to teach you the extremity of Rish Lakish's opinion, that even when it comes to meat that ultimately is going to be taken out of the azar to be eaten, it's eaten anywhere in Yerushalayim, still Adayin Amar Adayin Le'egiz Manalatzes. Rish Lakish still says yes, but it's not yet time for them to be taken out of the azara and to be eaten anywhere in Yerushalayim because they're not at Zrikas Adam yet. So even so, Rish Lakish still says that it will be pasul if the meat is taken out of the azara. Okay, even before Zrikas Hadam. Let's say that this concept of the emurim of Kodshim Kalim being taken out of the azara prior to Zrikas Adam is if they're pasul or not, is a machlokes tanoim. Emurei Kodshim Kalim sheyatzu lefnei Zrikas Adam. The emurim of Kodshim Kalim that were taken out of the azara before Zrikas Adam. Rabbi Eliezer Omer ein mo'alin boim. Rabbi Eliezer says that even after Zrikas Adam, they won't be Kodshim. Normally, of course, the emurim of a Kodshim Kalim post Zrikas Adam, the emurim become kachim, and they're burnt on the mizbeach, and there's a din me'ilah. But in this case, since they were taken out of the azara prior to Zrikas Adam, even post Zrikas Adam, they won't be kachim. There won't be a din me'ilah. Ve'ein chayav mishum alei mishum pigel. If the korban was pigel, you will not be chayav kares for eating these emurim. No servitami, or if the emurim are left over after, if we're talking about a korban shalom, after 2 days, if you eat them, you won't be chayav for no sir, or if you're tummy when you eat them, you won't be chayav for that. Since the emurim of the kachim kalim that were taken out of the azar prior to Zrikas Adam are pasul, therefore there's no me'ilah, no pigel, no noser, no tamir. Rabbi Kiva Omer, mo alim boen, v'chayavin mishum pigel, alen mishum pigel, noser v'tamir. Rabbi Kiva says the opposite. There is a din me'ilah for these emurim. You will be chay for pigel, noser v'tamir. My lab, and let's say, b'deharder ailinu plige, and let's say that the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Kiva is even if you brought the emurim back into the azara. So kilu, it was prior to Zrikas Adam. The emurim of the kachim kalim were taken out of the azara, and then they were brought back into the azara. And even so, and then Zrikas Adam was done, the emurim are here in the azara. Even so, Rabbi Eliezer says there's no me'ilah, etc., since they had left the azara. What the machlokas is the Ma'asaver Mifsale B'Yotze. The Rabbi Eliezer says that when the emurim were taken out of the azara, they became pasul. Ma'asaver Lo Mifsale B'Yotze, and Rabbi Kiva says no, that taking the emurim out of the azara does not make them pasul. Amar Papa says a puppet. B'dehader ailinu kuli amalo plige. Look. Says a papa that if they were taken back into the azara, I can argue that even Rabbi Eliezer would say that there is a din me'ilah, that if they were taken back into the azara and then Zrikas Adam was done while they were in the azara, I could argue that even Rabbi Eliezer would say that there would be that there would be a din me'ilah and pigel and tameh, etc. But here the machlokes in Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Kiva is when the emurim were taken out of the azara prior to Zrikas Adam and left outside of the azara, which means that when Zrikas Adam was Zrikas Adam, the emurim were still outside of the azara. V'alpliga, and the machlokes is to Marsaver ein Zrika Ma'elis Liyotze, that Rabbi Eliezer says the Zrikas Adam cannot have any effect on the emurim that have been taken out of the azara and left outside of the azara. Whereas Reb Akiva says that the Zrikas Adam can still work for the emurim even though they've been taken out of the azara and left out there. But 1 second, in the context of shtei ha-lechem, on Shavuos, there are 2 wheat breads that are offered, and they are offered together with 2 kisbei atzereses. And says Rav Papa that in a scenario where the wheat breads were taken out of the azara prior to the Zrikas Adam of the sheep, of the kisbei atzeres, so says Rav Papa there, but the isnu avroi, if the breads remain outside of the azara, kuli alma lo plige, there's no machlokas there, that in that case there would be no din me'ilah. But the ailinu ligavoy plige, the machlokas is when they've been brought back into the azar. So why is Rav Papa saying here that the machlokas is when the emurim were left outside the azar, and Mashtei Lechem is saying that when it's outside the azar there's no machlokas? So anamile gabe shtei lechem. Yes, Rav Papa says that when it comes to shtei lechem, de lav gufe de zivcha. Look, when it comes to the Shtei Alechem, we're talking about the Zrikas Adam of the Kisbei Atzeres having an effect on Shtei Alechem, which is an entirely different korban. So in that case, we're saying, look, when they are outside of the Azara, everyone agrees that there will be no Din Me'ilah. It's a completely separate korban. Shtei Alechem, it's korban mincha. The Kisbei Atzeres are Sham Tzibor. However, when it comes to About emurim, but when we're talking about the emurim of a korban shlamim, for example, the gufe de zivcho, it's the emurim of the actual korban whose blood is being zrikad. But the isma avray plige, you could say that even when they're outside of the azar, there's still a machlokas, and Rabbi Eliezer would still say, no, Rabbi Kiva would still say that there would be a din me'ila, since it's the actual emurim of the actual animal whose blood is being zrikad. Friends, that was Daf Pei Tes of Masechta Zevachim. Daf Pei Tes of Masechta Zevachim was givaldik. The first part of the daf, we learned about Tadir 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 Kodem. That was awesome, right? We're talking about korban Tamids taking priority over korban musafs, and even within korban musafs, right? A musaf of Shabbos will take priority over musaf of Rosh Chodesh, givaldik. And then we discussed prioritizing based on holiness, that whatever korban is holier than the other will take priority, and then we compared all sorts of korbanos, and that's what we did. But those were kind of the two big concepts of Daf Pei Tes of Masechta Zevachim. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good one. Cheers.